I mean, the average of black kid today, I think, is probably better off, certainly materially, than say Ben Carson was when he was growing up.
Ben Carson, the famous
Black
surgeon at Johns Hopkins.
Right, right.
Who is immensely accomplished in every way.
Yes.
Right.
I would say that certainly the black kids who are growing up today have a higher material standard of living than I had. The difference was that the schools were good when I came along. They were especially good in New York at that time, hard as that is to believe. But the kids who grew up in that same place where I lived, they will not get that same education. Now that can be blamed on somebody, but it has very little to do with what happened 100 or 200 years ago. And it's true in other countries. I mean, in Nigeria, for example, there's a tribe, the Igbos, who are living in one of the least fertile parts of Nigeria, who were in fact enslaved in centuries past by other tribes and so on. When the British moved in and set up schools, the Igbos went for the schools. By the time Nigeria became independent, the Igbos had climbed above the other groups that had been ahead of them to begin with. So, but there are all kinds of cross currents of factors. The particular culture, or the particular geography, you run through the whole list of them.
You cite, in Intellectuals and Race, you cite an observation by the intelligence expert, IQ scientist, James Flynn, that just stopped me cold. After the Second World War, you've got large numbers of American troops remaining in Germany. For that matter, there's still several tens of thousands there today. And both black and white American soldiers had children with German women. And Flynn discovered that those children growing up in Germany showed no IQ differences at all. The black kids and the white kids, the same. Quoting Intellectuals and Race, Professor Flynn concluded that the reason was that the offspring of black soldiers in Germany, and now you're quoting Professor Flynn, grew up in a nation with no black subculture, close quote. Which means what? Which means they experienced exactly the same expectations. Is this the...
No, the expectations are external. The culture in which they grew up was not the culture in which black kids grew up in America today.
So they had...
There's no gangster rap that was pervasively available in Germany.
So here's what I'm getting. There is something about black subculture in America today that holds African Americans themselves back?
Yes. In fact, I went into this in a previous book on which about black rednecks and white liberals, because that same subculture.
Let's talk about two of your books here. Go ahead.
Because that very same subculture held whites in the South back as well. That in the time this mental testing in the First World War turned up, among other things, the fact that whites from various 4 or 5 southern states scored lower on the mental test than blacks from 4 or 5 northern states. And so it really was a question of the subculture that was there, which was a handicap to both.
All right. And so whose job is it to say, wrong subculture, folks, you're harming yourselves?
Well, I would think in an ideal world that intellectuals might take on that task, but the world that we live in, I've noticed, is not ideal.
All right. What is to be done? Take a look at President Lyndon Johnson speaking at Howard University in 1965.
Oh, yes.
But freedom is not enough. You do not wipe away the scars of centuries by saying now, you are free to go where you want and do as you desire and choose the leaders you please. You do not take a person who for years has been hobbled by chains and liberate him, bringing up to the starting line of a race, and then say, you are free to compete with all the others, and still justly believe that you have been completely fair.
It's pathetic. It's not a question of, there's no you who has the control to be completely fair or completely unfair. I mean, the circumstances are. So someone once criticized mental tests on grounds that the tests were unfair. And I think it was David Reisman who said the tests are not unfair. Life is unfair, and the tests are measuring the results. But who has control of life? Who has control of the past? Who has control of the culture that people have in the present, which they've inherited from the past?
Welcome back to Breakdown Friday. Joseph Ward, Patrick Irvin, Professor Carl Tone Jones. We're here breaking down the clip you just seen from Thomas Sowell, talking about black culture and black subculture, and basically black culture is destructive, black subculture is holding us back. But the overall point he was getting at, and I'll put the link to the full video in, but the overall point he was getting at is because black people can achieve and can succeed, he's using that to say, well, this is why racism doesn't exist. And in some areas, black people are able to outperform white people. So because black people are able to outperform white people in some areas, these are stark indicators that racism, white supremacy does not exist. It's basically what he's trying to get at. So, yeah, Pat, what you think, my brother? What you think about the clip and the points that Thomas Sowell was making against black culture and how it's holding us back?
Well, his point about gangster rap and subculture is totally based. It's just not accurate. Especially when you consider that the largest demographic consumer of gangster rap is white kids. So to blame the failure of black kids to achieve on an IQ test, which has been shown to not necessarily carry a lot of relevance in terms of success, but you know, it does have its uses. I'm not saying it doesn't have its uses. I'm just saying like they're kind of all over the place because you're talking about a mental acuity test or a test that measures your ability to integrate and solve problems, or a test that measures your ability to manipulate data, or a test, you know what I'm saying? Like this test, what exactly are we using this IQ test for? Which IQ test are we using? What are the outcomes that we're measuring it up against? But that's a whole other thing because it doesn't matter because the group in question is also the largest consumer of the culture that you say is what's holding black people back. So we have a fundamental like disagreement there in terms of you're pointing at this thing and saying this is one of the reasons black people are failing, but ignoring the fact that that same thing is consumed in larger quantities by a group that is allegedly succeeding. So then we have that problem. But then on the other end, what kept blaring over my mind is his idea that life is unfair, so no one should be blamed for it, white or black, right? So this is an interesting idea because you only hear it from successful Negroes.
Yeah.
As a way to kind of, you know, we talk about white guilt all the time. I think white guilt is in a lot of ways kind of being, white people are tired of feeling guilty. So they're being desensitized to white guilt. And people like Thomas Sowell kind of helped that happen. But he's also feeling guilt. He's feeling guilt at being one of the token Negroes that made it through and being looked at by people saying, well, why aren't you doing anything to help the rest of us? There's a type of pressure that successful black people experience that we don't talk about. And a lot of the ways that they maneuver, in my opinion, is a way for them to kind of soothe their own stress with being out of place. You know, we talk about the out of place principle, which is, you know, a situation where black people that have achieved a level of success that is uncommon for black people or something that's seen as abnormal oftentimes have worse health outcomes and worse health other their health isn't bolstered by their increased access to resources in the way that you would think it would be. And certain communities, the Mexican community I'm thinking about in particular, health outcomes for middle income Mexican Americans are actually worse than they are for lower income Mexican Americans, and a lot of that is the out of place principle. Black people experience that too. I think Thomas Sowell is experiencing that cognitively. Like he doesn't want to deal with the fact that you're a black man that has made it in America despite all of the odds. And now the community might be looking at you with a eye of obligation and expectation that you do something for the community, and you don't want to deal with that. You don't want to. So, because even when he talks about the expectations being different, okay, the expectations are different. But you say, well, expectations are external. Okay. So, did black people come up with the IQ test?
Right.
Like, there's just so many there's so many incongruencies in what he's saying, and they're all very subtle. Where I can see the argument making sense to people that aren't really paying attention to what he's saying in a very nuanced way, because he's trying to cover the nuance with broad statements.
But how can the expectations of a group who don't have power over you actually influence you? You have to answer that question. For the expectations to be able to influence a whole group of people, they have to come from a group of people who have more power than them.
Well, but even with
Hence,
that,
external expectations.
and I'll land my plane here, but when we're talking about culture, we gotta understand like culture is a product of your environment. You get three people in a room together, you leave them in there for a week, they will develop culture amongst them. All right. Culture is something that happens. It just is. If your culture is not working for you in the moment that you exist in, then there are a few things at play. One of which could be that the environment you're currently in is not the environment that the culture was produced in or that is conducive to survival in it. So then you have friction. You got to make cultural changes. The other of which could be that you haven't been permitted to develop culture naturally because there has been an external force acting on the collective that is retarding the natural development of culture. So when we start talking about culture and counterculture and all these other things, because counterculture is a real phenomenon, but people really don't dig into it. Counterculture doesn't just happen. Counterculture develops when there are a group of
It's
people,
a necessity.
right, that can't access resources and the things they need through participating in the natural cultural system. So they develop a separate cultural system that usually operates counter to get what they need.
It's a compensatory necessity.
So if we're talking about counterculture in the black community, then we still are kind of pointing the finger at American culture. Why is it that black people need a counterculture?
Well, he has a lot of incomplete points, but PC went away.
So
But he went away. But no, I'd say it's a bit of my piece because I wrote down a whole lot of things that he was talking about. Of course, I had more time to sit with this than you all. But he in the beginning he talked about black children having more material things than black children did when he was young, and you could basically see him using that as a measuring stick of progress for black people. So because black people spend more money on material things, this is a clear indicator that black people have made real tangible progress as a people and put themselves in a greater position of power. Well, we can look at black economics. I mean, we can look at the myth of the buying power. Yeah, we spend this much money, but we lose this much money, and we still, as a group of people, don't have aggregated wealth. Why don't we have aggregated wealth, Thomas Sowell? You think black, because at one point black people worked together. It's not like black people never worked together in America. At one point, black people worked together, but something happened, Thomas Sowell. Something happened, and black people stopped working together. We're talking about external expectations or external influences, Thomas Sowell, what we talk about. But PC, what give us your thoughts on this clip and some of the points that Thomas Sowell was breaking down, and which one of the points really stood out to you in the beginning?
Well, I'm glad y'all pointed out it was Thomas Sowell, because I couldn't tell. I thought it was two white guys. So, and my allergies have been bothering me. So, but so today's been one of those days, and I think it didn't really kick back in until we watched the clip. So, I guess I'm allergic to bullshit. So
I chew.
Thank you. But I jotted down a few things. First of all, Pat, beautifully covered the part about, gangster rap and his so-called influence. When you actually understand that, first and foremost, these are 16 and 17-year-old kids at the time that were producing this music, and they were doing it as a reflection. They weren't, philanthropists. They weren't scholars. They weren't, they didn't see themselves as influencers. Actually, they actually took a page. When you talk to a lot of them, they took a page out of, what Public Enemy used to provide, what some of the conscious rap used to provide, but they added their experience, the street life experience to it. Now, how it was exploited, that wasn't black people. That was the same people that funded private prisons.
I'm just saying.
Exploiting it. And, people like Leah Cohen, Jerry Heller. Yeah. So those weren't black men at the time. And, certain types of music that made it to the airwaves, and they made it where they could make it to the airwaves. And we talk like it wasn't a protest against that. People have like a revisionist history. See Dolores Tucker led a campaign right out here in Philly, and eventually led to congressional hearings. These young rappers were chased off of stages in every state they went in. They were arrested on stage. They were thrown in jail many times for performing these songs. So they act like there was no pushback to this in terms of the culture that was put out there. There was, but at the same time, disassociating as an economist, he's supposed to be an economist, disassociating the economic conditions that caused a lot of the, that caused a lot of the problems that these young people dealt with. And they were reporting it because they saw it as them reporting it, not glamorizing it, but reporting it at the particular time. So, this really speaks to a guy that grew up being ostracized. I would love to learn his life story. Like, I would love to learn how he came up, whether or not he felt ostracized from the black community. Because when you do a deep dive, it's kind of like a scientist who say that they hope that eventually a virus will attack human beings because we're a virus to Earth, and our population, we're causing damage. So the Earth needs to survive. In order for it to survive, you need to eradicate itself of the virus that is people. And then you look into the background of these scientists, and you find out they grew up scorned. They grew up hurt. So they don't give a damn if the world falls apart because they don't have any love for the world. Thomas Sowell doesn't give a damn about the black community because he has no love for the black community. So when he talks about the black community, he wishes that the culture didn't exist. Everything he speaks to being assimilated and assimilating to culture. When we talk about black Germans, assimilation into culture because there's no black culture. So black culture is bad, or is it impoverished culture is bad? Is it the fact that deprived culture is bad? Because when black people did build in this country, everywhere black people built, white folk followed and burnt it down, flooded it, created an infrastructure where it become insignificant and so forth. Every opportunity, laws, policies put in place. So you're talking about laws and policies doesn't matter, but the same laws and policies are still applicable to today. The Dred Scott decision still is seen and shown today. When black people are in the streets and especially at the hands of non-blacks, we see that there is no right of a black person that a white man is duty bound to respect. We still see that stuff. So to play that game is really disingenuous, but it actually is a little worse than disingenuous. It's criminal.
It's intentional.
Right. Well, see, this is the same person that, so he talked about the Igbos in Nigeria. Let's talk about how they took to education. Not only did they take to education, but they also took to cultural change. They wanted to be white. You find Nigerian men now, many of them adore white women. Black women adorn white and European men over in Nigeria. They adorn because they were colonized and they themselves assimilated. Their court system, they're still wearing wigs. They're still wearing white wigs in their court systems. So, I could say a lot more, but it basically comes down to a man who has this is the one place I'm gonna disagree with Pat. I don't think he feels guilt. I think he has a burning level of vitriol and disdain for the black community because at some point he wasn't accepted as one of ours. He wanted to be seen as something major, somebody accomplished. But we look at him the same way we look at Larry Elder. In fact, I honestly say Larry Elder is blacker than he is. That's
when the left wing white people, when they name a black person, they name Thomas Sowell. He's the only one.
I mean, shit. Thomas Sowell was the name that was used to break down the black manosphere when Pearly Things was out there talking about who she was going to quote, black scholars and so forth. So when you have a racist white supremacist like her quoting Thomas Sowell, you got to ask yourself whose community does he really benefit? And with that, I'll land my plane.
He benefit the community that lace his pockets, right? So, I made my point about black children having material things and him using that as a measure of black progress. But to the rap music point, last week's show, Pat made a point about T.I. Interview that in the interview T.I. was exposing his experience going to label heads and telling them that he wanted to make more positive music, and they basically told him no. T.I. isn't the only one. We've heard a plethora of artists talk about wanting to make more positive music, and the label heads, the white label heads, telling them no. And if you make this type of music, then you're not going to get paid. You're not going to do what you need to do. We're not going to let you out your contract. You're not going to fulfill your stuff. It's documented. It's history that rap music didn't take this turn that it took, this destructive turn that it took, until it became mainstream, and it can't become mainstream without white people being the engine behind it. It went from a cultural movement to something mainstream and global. And artists, think about the crossover. When artists cross over, that's because they have white people being the engine behind them.
Or you have white people wanting to have direct influences over the culture that follows the music. Let's not think for a second that we're not dealing with a colonized group of black folk here in America. And so when you make Meg Thee Stallion throw out the first pitch for the Houston Astros to start the season, when you put when you're the owner of the New York Jets and you have Sexy Reds sitting in your damn owner's box for the first game in the season.
Penn State game.
Right. So the Jets and Penn State.
That's not black culture.
Right. So, but what's being put in front of black people? See, Thomas Sowell said there's nobody to blame, but here's who you blame, because these are the ones who are directly involved in influence. They spend billions of dollars a year on advertisement because they know the effectiveness of advertising. So what exemplifies success? I heard a young rapper say, "I got white friends now, and that's how you know I'm popping." In a song.
Well, think about the phrases "white money" and "white famous." Right. But now if we want to talk about hood culture, ratchet culture, project culture, a couple shows ago, we talked about the purpose and the creation and the history behind the projects. Yeah. These projects these people were put into these places because this stuff was studied before this, and they knew it would create a destructive, dependent type of people.
We don't even have to go that far, Joe. We got three current examples, right? First of all, if you look at the Nuremberg trials, and they asked all of the Nazi war criminals They asked them, why did you persist in this evil doing, this evil acts? And they said, because we were just following orders, right? So then you had the Milgram experiment, where you had a man on one side of this panel who was supposed to be receiving electric shocks, and another person on another side who was supposed to be pressing a button to increase the level of voltage for those electric shocks, even to a point where it's lethal, considered lethal. And just because they were told to do it by a man wearing a lab coat, actually 70% of the people pressed the button for the lethal dose of electricity, even though it was an experiment. They didn't know that they were not killing somebody. All right. Then you're talking about because what we're talking about is a form of compliance, right? And it's social compliance. And one of the things that, so we go back to we talked about it before, the Stanford prison experiment. You put people in an environment and they will acquiesce to that environment.
Right.
All right. Because you took 10 college, 10 white students who actually were in Stanford University. These aren't just like your middle of the road state university or community college students. This is supposed to be the upper crust, but yet and still you put them in an experiment that was supposed to go 10 days. They had to shut it down in 5 days because it got out of control, because they mimicked the environment that they were trying to create.
Hey, why does the term Americanized exist? Huh? Because when you put somebody, anybody who comes from a foreign culture come to America, and if you really want to succeed, you have to assimilate, become Americanized, become a product of this new culture that you are in. Right now, like what he was saying about the Igbos, like when the colonizers came in and the Igbos went to the schools and they got all this education. I mean, we don't have to go too deep with that. Well, what's the state of Nigeria today with all that education?
Right.
I'm just saying that's very simple, Thomas, because you're using these points to say this is Black progress. This is how Black people are progressing over white people. Well, Nigeria is still in a state of turmoil, and the root of that is still colonization.
Well, and I know Pat about to jump in. I just want to say real quick, when you mention progress, what's the tool of measurement are we using to measure progress?
Well, he seemed to be using material gains, education, and career success. That's what he seemed to be using.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's why I said I don't like. What is he talking about? It's like it's a great way to you. What he just did was to me the intellectual equivalent of a painter showing up, pulling out their paintbrush, pulling out the paint, getting the paint all on the paintbrush, and then turning around and just moving their hand through the air as if they're actually painting something. Like, what are you doing? Like, we see you going through the motions, but what exactly are you doing?
Incomplete points.
Right. I think that's the, and if we're being honest, that's the brilliance of all of these counter Negroes, if you will.
Straight up.
They're very efficient. It's almost like they went to school as PC would say, they went to school to pump fake. Mm-hmm. Like, they got advanced degrees in pump fakery.
Yeah. They consider themselves to be more so intellectual than Black. And, it's unfortunate because being in that judgmental of a position, basically, what he does is he basically co-signs gaslighting Black people, for one, about these topics. But also he affirms the discrimination against Black people. He affirms the racism against Black people, and then they'll point the finger at the very people who are being discriminated against, the people who are being robbed of the resources or access to it, the people that have been put in some disastrous, desperate situations. People who are dealing with shrinkage, gentrification, they don't even know what's taking place around them, you know, and it's unfortunate that their plan to dumb down Black America has been so effective that we'll get the heat from most of the people who should be saying, damn, you know, we appreciate the fact that y'all are able to shed some light on this. And I'm not saying everybody does, you know, is not appreciative, but the ones that, like, especially like, and Pat broke it down before, the Black middle class, the Black middle and upper middle class Black folk will be the main ones that'll have, you know, the audacity to you know, to say that they agree more so with Thomas Sowell. And it's more so because if they didn't agree with Thomas Sowell, then we would have to start looking more so at their actions and activities.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And
he's a buffer.
yeah, you know.
Hey, so like his point about fair versus unfair, I don't know. Do he know that he, you know, was kind of disproving himself, or kind of, you know, going against? Because so okay, if we're talking about nature, just like pure nature, yeah, I get it. There's no such thing as fair, but we're talking about civilization, civilized people, right? So within a civilization of civilized people, fair can exist if we choose for it to exist. But fair doesn't exist because of power, domination, and influence.
Mhm.
Because in order for my life to be unfair, there has to be some kind of external power that is more powerful than I have to make my life unfair. Otherwise, I would have the ability to have a fair life. We will all have the ability to create fairness amongst each other, but we can't create fairness amongst each other because there's a power distribution. And because of this power distribution, you're going to have hierarchy, you're going to have rankings, and human beings are going to fall into it. Human beings, especially uncivilized human beings, naturally fall into these hierarchies, or they fight their way into these hierarchies to gain power and domination and influence. And because of this influence, your life no longer is fair. My life is fair because I have the power. Those who, the 1%, they have the choice and the ability to create fair. Everybody else doesn't. What are you talking about, Thomas?
Well, what he's talking about and what he doesn't want to acknowledge is the useful tokenism that's being displayed.
He ain't letting up on his ass.
You know what? I'm trying to make sure you don't have to bleep anything out this week.
It's all right. I'm putting the time down.
This dude, man, I don't like people like this. And it's bad because people like this make our job harder because they speak with such authority and they've been given a forum and a platform to do this. So they have more visibility. You know, somebody somewhere is buying. Every time he puts a book out, he's going to have places where people are buying, you know, 10,000 books, 10,000 copies, and then they just donate them to libraries all over the country. You know, he is the example of what's wrong with this particular system. And Eldon Lilly Fuller speaks about this, the tokenism aspect of it.
Negro mindset.
Right. Well, just a few Negroes will be put out in front of everybody to say, if I can do it, you can do it too. But just for that purpose. Meanwhile, creating more millionaires, but yet and still creating a bigger level of disparity between those who have and who have not.
Well, that's why he used, that's why, and I have to put the full clip, but he used Ben Carson as an example, basically saying, because from my understanding, Ben Carson from Gaston County around here, and that's the country. And so if Ben Carson can come from this little country, backwards town, that education system ain't that great and they're poor. So if a Ben Carson can come from this, why aren't the rest of you Negroes something in your life? And it's like, well, okay, so we just gonna act like the system of white supremacy doesn't exist, and they don't just allow certain people to seep through the cracks who play the game right. Because if you don't conform and assimilate and play the game right, you won't get through the cracks. And the only way around that is to do your own thing. You have to build for yourself. And even when you build for yourself, guess what they do? They come and get you. I
But
bet.
even that's bullshit, because when you talk about, well, I would pretty sure that the children of today would have more material
What
things
does
than
that mean?
no they didn't. You got parents who think I can't give my children a good life, so I'm gonna spend a whole freaking paycheck on a PlayStation 5. Now, just because they got a PlayStation 5 in their house does not mean they have more access to material wealth than he did. If he
Well,
can eat 3 square meals a night in a house where they didn't have to worry about the light bill, where they didn't have to worry about the gas, they didn't have to worry about all this other shit, then and he can go to a school where everybody at that particular time was living in the same conditions that he was, he is so full of shit, because that's not happening right now.
well, what's the okay? Let's say he's right. Black children, they have more material things. All right, let's go with that. How does that reflect his overall quality of life and access to resources to better their overall quality of life?
Because they have better toys. That's what
Right,
happens in the future. The
right.
future produces better toys.
Because you talked about how schools are bad.
But schools were better back then when he was going, right?
Right, but
Isn't
okay,
access to a better life?
okay, but Thomas, why are the schools bad? It's particularly why are the schools in poor black neighborhoods always the worst schools?
Well, but I think that kind of discredited his whole,
I'm just saying.
because it's like PC said, like, but
External influences.
yeah, because he even admitted the schools when I was growing up are better than the schools they have now. Okay, so what are you talking about?
Why were the schools better when you grew up? Who was teaching you? Because if you wasn't living in a white neighborhood, didn't have access, you wouldn't bust to these white. Because when did busing come about?
1954.
So if you were pre-busing, who was teaching you?
But even busing, like, and it's there's so much disingenuous foolishness going on with. Because I mean, look, if we can end the whole busing thing, like, it never really was. Every step of the way, we've been groomed to view ourselves as inferior, even when they try to help us. I've never heard of a story of white kids being bused into black schools.
Right. Right.
What was that movie with Denzel, the coach, when he was coaching? That was the only thing I ever even seen.
Yeah, but even in that, remember the Titans.
But that's a great point, because that further disproves his point, because if the black people were progressing and the black people had the things that they had to progress, why wasn't they bringing the white kids in to help them progress as well?
And I've said, or I've even said it in panel discussions, it would have been a lot safer for white kids to be bused into black schools than the other way around. It would have been so much safer, so much better, so much more equal. No, because somebody said that I ain't sending my kids to them niggas. You could bring them niggas to us. And that's the way the story always goes.
People who have the power said that.
I ain't never heard of no white bands trying to cross over to black audiences. You never hear about white people trying to come into black spaces. Not unless they slumming it. Or they trying to disappoint their parents.
They'll come hang out and go home.
Right.
Because when stuff get real black, they remember who they are.
Oh yeah. Well, they ain't forgot. They just, there's no benefit to continuing to pretend.
Right. Right. Yeah, but and it's like, like you're saying, like the overall black subculture is holding us back. I mean, we nobody's denying that we have a lot of negativity in black culture, but what we're not gonna do is act like this hood ratchet culture is black culture.
Let's talk about that part, man, because even with the Lyndon Baines Johnson speech, which one of the most racist presidents in the history. I mean, they all were fucking racist.
He still sound better than Thomas. He said something better than Thomas.
Oh yeah, he said something. But let's just talk about that whole notion of we can't just free them and turn them out and turn them free from their shackles and just let them out. We have to help them.
Shit.
That was more so put into 70 years prior with the supposedly white man's burden, in which why they started funding and building all these HBCUs for their mulatto children. Can we still say mulatto?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so. It's a
Yeah.
rapper name. So.
So, and the reason why I'm bringing that up, is because that was only put in place after they realized that black people were out here building towns out of nothing. Black people, post-slavery, post-Reconstruction, had developed a literacy rate of over 50%, which was faster than any other demographic in this country. White folks still couldn't read at that point. That's why they had to have comics in the political comics in the newspapers to explain to them the political issues of that time, because they could not read. So, you know, the reason why they created this because they wanted to control the progress of black people. This is why John Rockefeller and all those so-called philanthropists got together and devised the Bureau of Education, which became the United States Department of Education, so that they can actually control the academics that went into those places. This is why when you go to HBCUs, all the dorms are named after their wives, after these white men wives, and their last names prior to getting married or whatever. This is so they can control it. Howard University just recently, within the last 20 years, had to abandon, their particular professional and their business department. There was a class that taught them etiquette on how they were supposed to act, how they were supposed to wear their hair, how they were supposed to perform, speaking nasally and so forth, so they would be non-threatening in white environments. All these different things were put in place to control how black people function, because black people, when they operated in their own autonomy, was the direct competition to this white man in America. The so-called greatest nation on the planet produced these black people, these Negroes who we just had in bondage less than 70 years ago, and now all of a sudden they got booming towns all over the country, and they worked overtime to undermine, destroy, and fund terrorist organizations. The Ku Klux Klan was a terrorist organization. The Red Shirts were a terrorist organization that were government funded to disband and remove black people from power. So when you talk about who has an opportunity to deal with being unfair, and who do we point the finger to, you know who we put the finger to. We should be pointing the finger at you.
Last week it was Pat. This week is you. Hey, I'm keep finding these clips, setting y'all asses off. Hey,
Post these on Instagram.
I know, right? I know, right? But it's like,
post him dabbing his eyes too, and
I know,
say
right?
he's so emotional.
Right, going through it.
It's just crazy the lengths that he goes to try to basically make it seem like black people like something. Well, we know something is wrong with us, but like something is wrong with us to the point to where I don't even know what I'm trying to say, but it's crazy because black people can succeed. Yes, black people are not dumb. We're not ignorant people. If you leave us alone, yes, like any other people, if you leave us alone, we can progress. But like PC said, once we start progressing, something externally usually happens. These are the reasons why black people have not progressed as a people the way we were supposed to. This is the reason why black people have not been able to self-actualize as a people like we were supposed to be. It's not, yes, we do have internal cultural issues. Yes, we do have a lot of rap music that is negative. Yes, those things do exist, but why do they exist? The root of them is white. The root of them is white supremacists. It's what is laid in white supremacy, rather. So he's, like you say, he's not only disingenuous, he's intentional about creating incomplete, false, emotional narratives that the left will jump on, and black people who are disgruntled with the Democrats and looking for something new, they'll jump on it too. That's how you have all these channels, all these black people who are the conservatives. Because the thing is, even that black people choosing to be conservatives or liberals, that's crazy to me. You crazy if you're aligning yourself with either one of these parties. I'm looking at you sideways. Why? Neither party has done anything for us, right? But just the ideas that, we are holding ourselves back. No, there's a small group of black people who are doing destructive stuff to themselves. It's not the whole of black people. There are a lot of black people. It's a good number of black people who are out here doing everything we need to do to progress ourselves. But we understand the external influences that he mentioned, the external stuff that he mentioned, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know these things exist. We know all of this has happened to us. Let's not act like it didn't. Let's not act like black people woke up one day and say, you know what? We just don't want to do right no more. So we just not going to do right. Because how do we go from progressing all these years to regressing? Did we literally just wake up one day and say, oh man, you know what? I think we done progressed too damn much. What y'all think? What you think, Jehoshaphat? You think we progressed too much?
I'll roll a joint to that.
You know what I'm saying? Like they sitting on the porch with the pine straw in their mouth. Hey, we done progressed too. Look how many black people learn how to read that were illiterate. We need to abandon reading and start hating reading. No, but the influence of white supremacy.
When you can, people have a threshold, and I really think that black people have reached a threshold of trying to, because black people really did try to assimilate into this shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
black people really did try to be American.
He's an example of like he's a super saiyan assimilator.
Well, what he is a person that's not operating in good faith, you know. And like I said, he seems to be operating from a place of animosity. You know, I haven't heard him say one bad thing about the white community ever. You know, and maybe I just don't follow enough his material. Honestly, I don't care to see any more of his material, content, books, and none of that shit because, you know, he's really moving the needle in regards to being.
It's amazing. No, it's amazing, bro. Like, because he tried to use Southern white people who he paired Southern white people versus Northern black people, and the Northern black people outscored the Southern black people, the Southern white people in this educational test, and he using that as a measure. So, all right, okay. During slavery, some black people were doing better than white people. Does that mean slavery didn't exist and the influence of slavery didn't have what it had on black people because there were some black people doing slavery who was able to do better than some white people? Can we? Because that's the same logic, ain't it?
Yeah, you know, I'm gonna keep cussing. So like one thing I'm gonna keep. It's rare that somebody gets under my skin, but I just can't deal with a person who operates. It's like this, man. This is like you watch The Matrix. This is like the dude that portrayed, you know, Morpheus and Neo and stuff. Like he's working with the Matrix to destroy all those people who have broken free from the Matrix.
Hey, dog.
Giving them the keys to Zion and all that other stuff. That's what Thomas Sowell is.
Hey,
he's
dog.
meeting with Agent Smith as we speak.
Lions don't dominate zebras because sometimes zebras actually win. It's not a lot, but somehow zebras actually win. So the National Geographic is wrong, and when they show us the majority of the times when the lions be dominating the zebras, that's not true. The zebras are progressing because at some point zebras were able to defeat lions. So zebras therefore have more dominance than lions because some point that happened. Thomas Sowell.
Yeah. I mean, I'm laughing because an economist literally said that he has more, like today's economy has produced more material gain for
what?
people. But don't, yeah. Joe, this has to be really looked at though. If you look at the economy right now, like if you had $10 in 2000, the year 2000, that would be equivalent to having $24 today. Right? That means the economy, the inflation of this economy grew at least 200, almost 250%. Or my math is off. Pat, you know more about numbers than me. So at least 150%, right? So that means that basically speaking, The money was worth more back then. The value of a dollar was more back then.
But yeah,
So if you're an economist and you can't get that right, how can I trust your historical look on the social, economic, political conditioning of a people when you can't do the economic piece, and that's supposed to be your strong suit?
hey dog. See, our problem is we're looking at the rule and not the exceptions, right? Because it's the exceptions that show the progress of a people and not the rule. Because the rule is just, you know what I'm saying? That's more like a control rather than an actual measured outcome, right? It's a control to have to like pseudo measure, you know what I'm saying, like the other stuff, because you know that's how it goes, man. You can't you pay attention to the outlier, because outliers, remember, because think of it, let's break down the word, right? Out and liar, right? Because first of all, out is like outside the box, and liar, so that liar can be used more than one way. That could be lying down or telling a lie, right? So outliers, it makes sense, right?
Is this Ninja Boule?
I think he
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. Okay, that explains everything. All right. The gatekeepers of the urn. Yeah, that explains everything.
man, look at it, man. It's funny. It's not intelligent at all, and it's funny. But it's the amount of, like you said, white conservatives and black conservatives who use him as a measuring point to say, hey, I told y'all black people were doing better than what they say. I told y'all black people over here lying. Hey, Thomas Sowell said they lying, so they lying. Because Thomas Sowell is the president of black people.
Well, I think one good point that PC made that I think should be reinforced is the idea that education equals knowledge and intelligence. Because I know people that have a doctorate in economics that will openly tell you they're not well versed in the entirety of economics. They know their specific piece really, really well.
Look, people need to understand that. I did a class earlier today on FSU campus. I taught a class to FSU's nursing students. And coming out of the class, myself, my intern, and the instructor, we were having a conversation, and we were talking about doctors who don't have knowledge in infectious diseases. But like you said, they don't specialize in that stuff. So we go into these things thinking that an economist or a doctor or somebody in these specific fields have knowledge of the whole field. No, they specialize, like Pat said, they specialize in specific areas in these fields. But because of our ignorance, we go in and we think that they know everything about the entirety of the field, and they don't. Like I had an economic teacher that was in debt. How you do that?
Because economics and personal finance are not the, but
Right.
we get into like people not understanding the structure of higher education. Somebody that has a doctorate in something, including medical doctors, they've paid a lot of money for specialty. Being a specialist nets you a lot of money.
Right.
Being
Specific.
a generalist does not, and that's why for those, and I don't even understand how, but it also shows you how out of touch people are with the education, because your education gets narrower as you go up the field. In
Yep.
elementary school, you learning everything about everything, and in middle school, it narrows down. High school, it narrows down. Those are the
College, you
portion
pick
of
a
it.
major.
College, it narrows down. If you get your 2-year degree, it narrows down. You go for your bachelor's, it gets really narrow. Go for your master's, it gets super narrow. You going for your PhD, that's about as narrow as it can get. We don't have no other ways to narrow it down no more. That's why we stop right there. So the idea that just because somebody has an advanced degree means they know a lot about everything is totally, matter of fact, they probably spend so much time focusing on their one particular small niche area of expertise
They overlooked everything else.
that you probably know more than them about a lot of other things. So, but I think that's important because how do people like a Thomas Sowell become
Well,
history buffs?
Well,
It's
say this too before y'all get into that part. I'm not letting this dude off the hook. He
I
say
don't
he's
know.
an economist. He need to know the economy.
Hey, but they become they. So if this channel like blows up,
Your mama call him Clay. I'ma call him Clay.
people will people will expect us to know everything about everything, and that's one of the fallacies of the followers or the listeners is a person who specializes in one specific thing and may know a little bit about some of these other things. You would paint them as an expert on something because you have a question about it. And because they know this thing about this specific thing, you just summarize, well, if they know about this, then they got to know about this. Well, he's a psychologist or he's an economist or he's a mathematician, so he got to know about this. And it's like, well, no. That's why, hey, I am a gastroenterologist. I know I said I work on the gut. I'm a specific doctor for a specific body part. That's why you don't go to the eye doctor for a primary checkup. Matter of fact, you go to a primary doctor for primary checkup for the general stuff. But if you need something specific, the primary doctor won't do the colonoscopy. If you have skin issues, your primary doctor gonna send you to a dermatologist. If you have something with your nasal cavities, the primary doctor gonna send you to the doctor to do that because they do the general stuff and then there's specific stuff.
Well, I need that nasal dude right now. But I'm gonna say something like this about this, right? Because I listen, I rock with everything else saying is actually correct at one point. He spoke on something that had to do with economics. If he's going to speak on it, he should have at least done his own damn research and be able to be intelligible on that particular topic.
You don't have to do that when you get throwing out incomplete points. You just be surface level.
And I want to be clear. I'm not, for those watching, I'm not saying what I'm saying to discount what PC said, because honestly, I agree, and I'm quiet because PC is saying it all, so I ain't really got shit to say. I'm not a fan of redundancy.
Appreciate
but, but, I was making that point because I'm getting sick and tired of people thinking that because somebody's a doctor, they know shit. No, they don't. This dude made a bunch of statements. He don't know what the fuck he talking about. And if the last time he probably seriously thought about any of the things that he's thinking about, that he's talking about right now, at least from my frame of reference, was probably when he was in college. So
I think he went through the radical Black Power stage.
No, I don't think he ever was.
Clarence Thomas did. So
because I'm saying, but we can speak from experience. The vast majority of people, the moment they stop being pushed to think, they stop thinking. And even most of y'all watching this video, it don't feel good to hear, but the last time you probably seriously thought about something was in high school.
You know what though? He could have. I want to see a picture of him with a afro with the fist. Like
he got an AK with a black leather jacket.
Well, no. Well, okay. I'm sorry, Pat. Go ahead.
No. If he went through it, he went through it differently. Like, cause there's a difference between going through your radical Black Power phase surrounded by black people and going through that phase surrounded by white people.
Oh yeah, he was angry at white people.
Oh well. See, here's the thing, right? Because this speaks to something else, Pat. We talked about it earlier. Too. It's like a lot of these Black Power Negroes, like Pat said, you give them a couple of hours, they forget about the whole Black Power stuff, and they just get focused on the power. And sooner or later, they'll be your mouthpiece if you give them enough money and you provide them with anything. And he looks like he's been well taken care of. Looks like he's been well fed, and he talks very nasally. So he doesn't need a nose doctor.
What do you mean, Carl? What do you mean?
Well, when you talk like this, you're very, very, you're very unassuming, and you don't have, you don't come off as threatening. You know what I'm saying? So, who used to do that real good? Mike Tyson used to do that real good. And people started to talk about his squirrely voice. He don't talk like that no more. Maybe Thomas Sowell need to get in the ring with Mike.
Mike
Hey, man.
said, I am, what'd he say? He was talking to Lil Boosie. It ain't related. All right, go ahead.
Right.
Hey, man. All in all, be careful who you listening to. Fact check, folk. Know your stuff before you go out to talking. But be careful who you calling leaders and dubbing leaders, and you're gonna use that information as gospel and as a source to show that Black people out here lying about our conditions when we have proof to show. Of course, we know we have contrarians, and Black contrarians will always exist because of meritorious manumission and the House Negro syndrome, Jackie Robinson syndrome, Xavier syndrome, all of them, Stockholm syndrome, Hellon syndrome, all of that.
Yeah,
So,
we need to do a show on Xavier syndrome and what was the other one? JRS. We need to do a show and just put like the people, like Thomas Sowell, definitely Xavier's. You know, Larry Elder is definitely Xavier's. But then we have some others who are just JRS. You know, have Jackie Robinson syndrome. That would be a great show. I know you was.
well, you know, we did JRS. We need to do the Xavier.
Right.
Yeah. But man, y'all be cool, man. Y'all already know what it is. It's Friday, 7 p.m. Make sure you tune in to FetLifeStation.com. If you don't, then like Joe Biden say, you don't like Black people. You don't tune into the show. You don't like Black people. All right. Make sure you like this video, comment, subscribe, share it, tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend, because we cooking over here. We're everybody do the PC. Do the PC because we cooking over here. All right. Hey man, love y'all. Y'all make sure y'all catch the next show coming up.